I stood there with 3 xenobiology degrees, watching a human track imaginary threats with a device that cleans floors, and I had absolutely no explanation for why the cubs were treating it like a territorial challenge. Let me back up. My name is Kilvan. I run the xenobiology department on Way Station Kether, which is a fancy way of saying I spend most of my time explaining why species can't eat each other's food and why you shouldn't touch the Velcor without protective gear. 8 cycles I've been here. 8 cycles of careful diplomatic protocols, cultural sensitivity training, and making absolutely sure nobody starts an interstellar incident because they didn't understand alien body language. Then Katie arrived. The requisition form said Cultural Liaison Specialist. It did not say chaos in human form. It definitely didn't say person who will upend everything we thought we knew about predator psychology using equipment meant for hygiene maintenance. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The cubs were the problem, specifically Ambassador Turketh's cubs. 3 of them, each about the size of your average cargo pod, covered in rust-colored fur with bioluminescent stripes that pulsed when they were agitated, which was constantly. Their species, the Carvth, are apex predators from a death world where everything has fangs and the plants occasionally eat the animals. Quadrupedal, intelligent, and absolutely not accustomed to confined spaces with species they instinctively categorized as prey. The ambassador's offspring had been destroying their quarters for 6 days straight. Not in a childish tantrum way. In a "this territory is unacceptable and we will fight everything until it submits" way. They'd shredded 4 sleeping platforms, marked every corner with scent glands that made the environmental systems scream in protest, attacked maintenance drones on site. The station AI Sentinel had logged 43 aggressive incidents in less than a week. Standard protocol said separate them, sedate them if necessary, call in xenopsychology specialists. Ambassador Turketh said absolutely not. His offspring were not animals. They were sapient beings experiencing stress from an unfamiliar environment, and we would treat them with the dignity their status deserved. Which fine. Except dignified treatment wasn't stopping them from trying to fight the waste extraction system. I was in the main reception hall when Katie first encountered them. She'd been on station maybe 3 hours, still had her transfer documentation in hand. I was giving her the standard briefing about species interaction protocols when the cubs came through the corridor like a fur-covered storm system. Viergen, our security officer, was attempting to herd them back to their quarters, attempting being the key word. The cubs were ignoring him completely, their attention locked on something else entirely. The cleaning unit. You know the kind. Automated, about waist height, moves on. Repulsor fields, makes a soft humming sound while it works. Completely harmless. Standard equipment on every station and ship in the sector. The cubs had apparently decided it was a mortal enemy. The largest cub, male, stripes flashing bright orange, had his hackles raised. The other 2 flanked him, moving in that eerie, coordinated way pack predators do. All 3 were making this sound, a low rumbling that started somewhere deep in their chests. Not quite a growl, more like distant thunder. Tiny roars, Katie said. I looked at her. She was staring at the cubs with this expression I couldn't read. Not fear, not confusion, something else entirely. "Excuse me?" I said. "They're making tiny roars, trying to make themselves sound bigger than they are." She tilted her head. They think the vacuum is a rival predator in their territory. The vacuum, I repeated slowly, is a cleaning device. Sure, but it moves on its own, makes noise, and invaded their space. From their perspective, that's a threat. She handed me her documentation. Hold this." Then she walked directly toward the cubs. Virgan made a sound that in his species indicates extreme alarm. I probably made a similar sound. Katie was moving into striking range of 3 juvenile apex predators who were already in an aggressive state. Protocol said maintain minimum distance of 15 meters. She was at 5 meters and closing. The cub's attention snapped to her immediately. "Katie," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "please step back slowly." She didn't step back. She stopped about 3 meters away and just stood there. Didn't make eye contact. Didn't move. Her body language was completely relaxed, weight balanced, arms loose at her sides. The cub's rumbling intensified. Katie did something with her breathing, made it deeper, more audible. Then she made a sound, a sharp exhaling noise that wasn't quite language. The lead cub's ears flicked forward. She did it again. A rhythmic breathing pattern with these short exhale bursts mixed in. It sounded absolutely nothing like any language in the station's database. It didn't sound like language at all. The cubs stopped rumbling. "What is she doing?" Virgan whispered. "I have no idea," I admitted. Katie shifted her weight slightly, still not looking directly at the cubs. She moved at an angle, positioning herself between them and the cleaning unit. Not aggressive, not defensive, just occupying the space. The smallest cub, female, took a step toward her. Katie held her ground. She made that breathing sound again, softer this time. Then she did something completely incomprehensible. She turned her back on them, on 3 predators, who were already agitated. She turned her back and walked calmly toward the cleaning unit. "Someone stop her," Virgan said. Nobody moved. We were all too busy waiting for the inevitable mauling. Katie reached the cleaning unit and pressed something on its control panel. The unit's humming changed pitch. Got quieter. She adjusted another setting and the unit started moving, but slower, with a different motion pattern. Then she turned around and walked back toward the cubs. They hadn't moved. All 3 were watching her with this intense focus. The lead cub's stripes had shifted from orange to a pale yellow. In Carvth physiology, that indicates confusion rather than aggression. Katie stopped about 2 meters away. She made that breathing sound again. Then she sat down on the floor. Just sat. Cross-legged, hands on her knees, looking at nothing in particular. "Is she broken?" Virgan asked. "Do humans break when confronted with predators?" "I don't think so," I said, though honestly I wasn't sure. The female cub moved first. She approached Katie slowly, head low, ears swiveling, got close enough that her breath probably disturbed Katie's hair. The human didn't react, didn't flinch, didn't even look at the cub. The female circled around Katie once, twice, then did something I'd never seen a Carvth juvenile do with a non-pack member. She lay down next to Katie, just flopped onto the floor and rested her head on her paws. The other 2 cubs looked at each other. Some kind of communication happened that I couldn't parse. Then they approached too. The lead male sniffed Katie's shoulder. She let him. Didn't reach out, didn't try to touch, just allowed the investigation. After a long moment, he lay down on Katie's other side. The 3rd cub settled at her feet. Katie sat there surrounded by 3 juvenile apex predators, looking like this was the most natural thing in the world. "Somebody call the ambassador," I said quietly, "and maybe xenopsychology, and possibly an exorcist if any of the station species have those." Virgan was already on his comm. I heard him trying to explain the situation and failing completely. Katie shifted slightly. The cubs' heads came up immediately, alert. She made that soft breathing sound. They relaxed. "What?" I said, approaching slowly. "Are you doing?" "Pack-settling behavior," Katie said without looking at me. They were stressed because they perceived threats in their environment and didn't have a clear hierarchy structure. No alpha presence, just each other and a bunch of confusing stimuli they couldn't categorize. "They're not pack animals," I said. "I mean, they are, but they're sapient, diplomatic offspring. You can't just—" "The limbic system doesn't care about diplomatic credentials," Katie said. She had this matter-of-fact tone like she was explaining something obvious. "Fear response is fear response. Prey drive is prey drive. They're young in an unfamiliar environment, and their instincts were screaming danger. So I addressed the instincts. By making breathing noises, calming signals. Dogs use them, wolves use them. Apparently Carvth used something similar. It's not language. It's saying I'm not a threat without using threat assessment pathways." "Dogs," I repeated. "You're applying canid behavior to a species from a completely different evolutionary path on a planet 300 light-years from Earth." "Convergent evolution is wild," Katie said. She sounded almost cheerful about it. The ambassador arrived at a run. "Turketh is imposing even by Carvth standards. Massive, with silver-shot fur and stripes that pulse deep crimson when agitated. They were very agitated." "What is the meaning of this?" Their translator rendered the growls into galactic standard. "Why is an unknown alien in contact with my offspring?" Katie didn't move. The cubs didn't move either, though their ears tracked the ambassador's voice. "Your offspring were experiencing territory stress and threat response activation," Katie said. "I've established a temporary hierarchy structure to reduce their cortisol levels and redirect their prey drive." "Their what?" "Ambassador," I said quickly. "This is Katie. She's our new cultural liaison. She has experience with—" I paused, checking her file on my datapad. My translator had to be malfunctioning. "Animal behavior consulting?" "Dog trainer," Katie corrected. "Specialized in aggressive breeds and rehabilitation cases." Ambassador Turketh's stripes flashed through several colors I'd never seen before. "You treat my children like training subjects?" The growl was low enough to vibrate in my chest. "Like non-sapient beasts?" "No, sir," Katie said calmly. "I'm treating their stress response like a stress response. Sapience doesn't override neurology. Your children are intelligent. They're also scared and overwhelmed. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." The lead cub made a soft, chirping sound. His head was still on his paws, stripes a calm blue-green. The ambassador stared at his offspring, at Katie, at the cleaning unit, still moving in its new, altered pattern. Back to his offspring, who showed no signs of the agitation that had characterized every waking moment since they'd arrived on station. "This is highly irregular," Turketh said finally. "Yes, sir," Katie agreed. "Would you like me to stop?" The smallest cub had closed her eyes. She appeared to be falling asleep. The ambassador's stripes shifted through several more colors, finally settled on a pale orange that I'd learned indicated resigned acceptance. "Continue," he said. "But you will explain your methods in detail." "Happy to," Katie said. She made that breathing sound again. All three cubs responded with matching exhales, a synchronized pack behavior I'd only seen in nature documentaries about Carvth hunting groups. The ambassador watched this happen. His stripes went through at least 8 colors in rapid succession. I pulled up Katie's full file on my datapad, scrolled through her credentials. Species interaction training, yes. Cultural studies, yes. Extensive background in behavioral modification and stress response management. for non-sapient domesticated animals native to Earth. There was a note at the bottom of her file, a recommendation from her previous employer. It said, "Katie has an unusual gift for understanding predator psychology across species barriers. Also, she's absolutely going to do things her own way, regardless of what the manual says, so you might as well let her." I looked up from the datapad. Katie had convinced 3 juvenile apex predators that she was their pack leader using a vacuum cleaner and breathing exercises. This was going to be a very long assignment. So you're probably wondering what Station Command said when I reported that our new cultural liaison had established dominance over diplomatic offspring using techniques designed for creatures that fetch sticks. They said no. Specifically, they said absolutely not. Remove the human from contact immediately. Confine the cubs to quarters using standard containment protocols. And file an incident report explaining why I'd allowed an unqualified civilian to interact with the ambassador's children in the first place. I tried. Really, I did. The problem was the cubs. 12 hours after that first contact, they refused to let Katie leave. Not aggressively. They just followed her. Everywhere. When she went to her assigned quarters, they stationed themselves outside the door and made distressed vocalizations until she came back out. When she went to the commissary, they trailed behind her like furry, bioluminescent shadows. When Virgin attempted to physically guide them back to their own quarters, they planted themselves and wouldn't budge. The laid cub, who Katie had started calling boss because apparently giving them names was inevitable, actively positioned himself between her and anyone who approached too quickly. "This is a problem," I told Katie on day 2. We were in observation room 12. The cubs were visible through the transparent wall, arranged in a rest formation around the chair where Katie had been sitting before I pulled her aside. "You understand this is a problem." "It's an attachment issue," Katie said. She was watching the cubs with this analytical expression. "They've imprinted on me as a safe authority figure. It'll ease once they feel secure in the environment. They're sapient beings. They don't imprint. Their neocortex is sapient. Their limbic system is still running on survival protocols." She pointed at the smallest cub, the female. "Watch Tiny. See how her ears track sounds, but she doesn't startle anymore? 3 days ago, every unexpected noise triggered a threat response. Now she's filtering stimuli through a different assessment framework." "Tiny," I said flatly. "She's the smallest. It's descriptive." "Katie, the ambassador is filing formal complaints with Station Command hourly. He's calling this treatment demeaning, cultural assault, speciesist." "What does he call his kids destroying everything they touch?" I didn't have an answer for that. Station Command escalated, sent in Dr. Hickserin, our xenopsychology specialist. Hickserin has 4 doctorates and published the seminal text on predator species cognitive development. She took one look at Katie's methodology and requested an immediate consultation. We met in conference room 6. Hickserin pulled up holographic displays showing Carvth neurological scans, behavioral matrices, developmental psychology frameworks. She spent 20 minutes explaining why what Katie was doing shouldn't work. The Carvth cognitive structure doesn't support external pack hierarchy after the age of 3 solar cycles, Hickserin said. She highlighted neural pathways in the holograms. By the time they reach the juvenile stage, typically 5 to 8 cycles, they've developed independent identity formation. They can't simply adopt an unrelated alien as an authority figure. The neurology doesn't permit it. "Cool," Katie said. "So why is it working?" Hickserin's scales flushed purple, which in her species indicates profound irritation. That's what I'm trying to explain. It's not working. What you're observing is coincidental behavioral modification based on environmental factors we haven't identified yet. Want to test that? Katie asked. Which is how we ended up in the Cubs' quarters with full monitoring equipment and half of the xenopsychology department watching through remote feeds. The quarters were still a disaster. Shredded furniture, scent markings everywhere, claw scores on every surface. The Cubs had retreated to the far corner, clustered together, stripes flashing aggressive orange. Katie walked in empty-handed. No tools, no treats, no equipment. She stood in the center of the room and waited. The Cubs watched her. Tiny's ears swiveled forward first. Katie made that breathing sound, the soft, rhythmic pattern I still couldn't properly categorize. Boss stood up, approached her slowly. Subject Alpha approaching liaison, Hicksren narrated into her recorder. Displaying cautious investigation posture, no aggression markers. Katie held out her hand, palm down, fingers loose. Boss sniffed it. Then he did something that made Hicksren stop narrating mid-word. He lowered his head and pressed it against Katie's palm. That's a submission gesture, Hicksren said quietly. That's a juvenile Carvth submission gesture to a recognized pack authority. Katie scratched behind Boss's ears. He leaned into it. Now watch, Katie said. She pulled a small device from her pocket, clicked it once. Sharp, distinct sound. All three Cubs looked at her immediately. She clicked it again, pointed at a specific spot on the floor. Boss walked to the spot and sat. Click, point. Tiny joined him. Click, point. The third Cub, who Katie called Scraps because he was constantly trying to eat things that weren't food, completed the formation. 3 juvenile apex predators sitting in a precise row, waiting for instruction. What? I said. Is that device? Clicker, basic operant conditioning tool, sound marker for desired behavior. Katie clicked again, pulled something from her other pocket. Small cubes of what looked like compressed protein, tossed one to each Cub. They caught them mid-air, crunched happily. You're giving them treats, Hicksren said. Her voice had gone very flat. You're using reward-based training on sapient diplomatic offspring. I'm establishing clear communication and positive reinforcement patterns, Katie corrected. They were stressed because nothing made sense. Now things make sense. Action leads to consistent result. Click means correct behavior. Correct behavior gets reward. Simple feedback loop. It's reductive, Hicksren protested. It's effective. Katie clicked again, made a hand gesture. The Cubs lay down, another gesture. They rolled over, another. They returned to sitting position. This is impossible, Hicksren said. She was scrolling through her neural scans frantically. The cognitive pathways required for this level of cross-species behavioral conditioning don't exist in Carvth juveniles. They shouldn't be capable of interpreting arbitrary human gestures as command structures. And yet, Katie said. She was scratching Scraps under the chin now. He was making a rumbling sound that definitely wasn't aggressive. Maybe your models are incomplete. Ambassador Turketh chose that moment to arrive. He'd been watching the remote feed. His stripes were cycling through colors so fast I couldn't track them. You reduce my offspring to performing creatures, he said. The translator couldn't quite capture the depth of insult in his tone. You teach them tricks like beasts. Katie looked at him directly for the first time. Sir, with respect, your children were hurting themselves. They were stressed to the point of self-harm. Aggression is often a fear response. I'm not teaching tricks. I'm teaching impulse control and emotional regulation through structured interaction. Impulse control, Turketh repeated. Yes, sir. Watch. Katie pulled out her clicker. Boss, wait. Boss froze mid-movement, his whole body tensed. Katie placed a treat on the floor directly in front of him. Boss stared at it. Every muscle said he wanted to lunge for it. He didn't move. 10 seconds. 20. 30. Okay, Katie said softly. Boss took the treat. Gentle, controlled. 3 days ago, he would have attacked that immediately, Katie said. Probably would have attacked me for having it. Now he can delay gratification. Make choices. That's not reduction. That's skill building. Turketh stared at his offspring. Boss looked back at him, stripes a calm blue-green, and made that soft, chirping sound. The aggression incidents, I said, checking my datapad. Sentinel, report status. 0 aggressive incidents in 41 hours, the station AI responded. Stress hormone markers in monitored spaces have decreased 63%. Destruction of property has ceased entirely. The ambassador's stripes settled into a color I'd never seen, sort of a confused yellow-orange. I don't understand, he said finally. Neither do I, Hicksrin admitted. She was still, staring at her neural scans like they'd personally betrayed her. Katie clicked her clicker. All 3 cubs looked at her. She made a sweeping gesture toward the ambassador. The cubs approached Turketh slowly, respectfully, and arranged themselves in a resting formation at his feet. The ambassador looked down at his offspring, then at Katie, then at me. Explain this, he demanded. I can't, I said honestly. I have 3 degrees and 40 publications, and I cannot explain any of this. Katie was already heading for the door. I have a meeting with Environmental Services about modifying the cleaning unit patrol patterns. They're still too threatening. Also, someone should probably look at the waste system. Pretty sure the cubs think it's growling at them. She left. We all stood there. 3 xenobiologists, 1 security officer, 1 ambassador, and 3 extremely calm predator cubs who, against all known science, had accepted a human dog trainer as their pack leader. Hicksrin pulled up another scan, stared at it, made a sound that in her species indicates existential crisis. I need to rewrite my dissertation, she said. The experts arrived on day 8. Not just any experts. The Galactic Council's premier xenopsychology team. Dr. Vexlun, who literally wrote the book on predator cognition. Dr. Sil Ith, who'd spent 20 years studying Carvth social structures. 3 assistants with more degrees than I could count. They brought scanning equipment, behavioral analysis matrices, and the kind of academic confidence that comes from never being fundamentally wrong about anything. Katie was in the recreation hall teaching the cubs to play fetch. Yes, fetch. This is it? Dr. Vexelin asked me. We were watching through the observation window. This is the human who supposedly revolutionized our understanding of cross-species behavioral dynamics? That's her, I said. Katie threw a soft sphere across the room. Boss chased it, grabbed it in his jaws, and brought it back to her. She clicked her clicker, gave him a treat, threw the sphere again. She's playing a retrieval game with a sapient being, Dr. Silith said. Her tone suggested I'd brought her here to watch paint dry. Wait for it, I said. Katie pointed at Tiny, made a gesture. Tiny ran to a specific marker on the floor and sat. Another gesture. Scraps joined her. Boss completed the triangle formation without being told. Katie threw the sphere. All 3 cubs tracked it with their eyes, but nobody moved. Wait, Katie said. The sphere bounced twice, rolled to a stop. 15 seconds, 20. The cub's muscles were tensed. Every instinct said chase. They stayed perfectly still. "Scraps, go," Katie said. Only Scraps moved, retrieved the sphere, returned it, sat back in formation. "Impossible," Dr. Vexlin said flatly. "That's what I said," Hicksrin told him. She'd joined us specifically to watch the experts encounter Katie's methods. I think she was enjoying this. 6 days ago, those cubs couldn't be in the same room as moving objects without attacking. Now they have impulse control that would challenge most adults of their species. Dr. Silith was already scanning. Neural activity monitors, pheromone detectors, behavioral pattern recognition software. The works. "The human must be using some form of chemical influence," she said. "Pheromone manipulation, subliminal frequency patterns." "We checked," I said. "She's using breathing sounds, hand signals, and something called a clicker." "A what?" Katie chose that moment to introduce a new element. She'd gotten the environmental services team to bring in a modified cleaning unit, the same type that had triggered the original incident. She activated it. The cubs' heads snapped toward it immediately. Stripes flashed yellow, alert but not aggressive. Katie made her breathing sound. The cubs looked at her instead of the unit. She held up the sphere, pointed at the cleaning unit, threw the sphere so it bounced off the unit's housing. Boss started forward, stopped, looked at Katie. "Check it out," Katie said. She said it in human standard, not galactic. The translator couldn't have rendered it in a way the cubs would understand linguistically. Boss approached the cleaning unit slowly, circled it once. The unit was moving, humming, doing everything that had triggered prey drive responses before. Boss sniffed the unit, picked up the sphere, brought it back to Katie. She gave him 3 treats and scratched behind his ears. His stripes went full blue. Content. "She just counter-conditioned a threat response," Dr. Silith said slowly. "In less than 30 seconds. Without language." "How?" Dr. Vexlin demanded. Katie noticed us watching, waved, walked over with the cubs trailing behind her. "Dr. Vexlin, Dr. Silith, I've read your work," she said. "The predator cognition frameworks are fascinating. Really solid theoretical foundation." "Theoretical," Dr. Vexlin repeated. His scales had gone rigid. "Well, yeah. You can't exactly run controlled behavioral experiments on sapient species. Ethics issues." Katie shrugged. "But the limbic system doesn't care about ethics or sapience. It cares about survival, safety, and social bonds. That's universal." "It absolutely is not universal," Dr. Silith said. "Each species has unique neurological architecture. You can't apply broad principles across evolutionary barriers." "Sure you can. Watch." Katie clicked her clicker. All 3 cubs sat immediately. She made a hand signal. They lay down. Another signal. They stood up. She pulled out a small piece of fabric, one of the cubs' toys that had survived the initial destruction phase, tossed it on the floor. "Boss, leave it," Katie said. Boss stared at the toy. Every muscle tensed. He didn't touch it. "Tiny, take it," Katie said. Tiny picked up the toy, brought it to Katie. "Now watch this," Katie said. She pulled out a datapad, pulled up a recording, her own voice saying, "Boss, sit." Boss sat. The recording said, "Tiny, down." Tiny lay down. "They're responding to recorded commands," I explained to the experts. "They obey her even when she's not physically present, even when it's clearly just a recording." Dr. Vexelin's scales had gone completely colorless. In his species, that indicates system shock. "That's attachment imprinting," he said quietly. That's juveniles responding to a recognized parental authority figure. Except this human isn't their parent, isn't even their species, hasn't been here long enough to establish the neural pathways required for that level of bonding. 2 weeks, Katie said. Give or take. That's about average for establishing basic trust and command structure with dogs. Apparently works with Carvth cubs, too. They are not dogs, Dr. Silith said. No, they're way smarter, which actually makes it easier. They understand cause and effect faster. Learn pattern recognition quicker. The sapience helps. The sapience should prevent this, Dr. Vexelen said. He was pulling up his own research now, scrolling through decades of data. Sapient beings don't submit to arbitrary authority based on conditioning. They evaluate, analyze, make cognitive choices about social hierarchies. They're kids, Katie said simply. Sapient kids in a scary situation with no familiar reference points. I gave them structure. Structure reduces anxiety. Reduced anxiety allows learning. Learning builds confidence. It's developmental psychology. Just happens to use some techniques usually applied to canine behavior modification. She made that breathing sound again. All 3 cubs responded with matching exhales. That, Dr. Silith said, pointing. What is that sound? What does it mean? Calming signal, communicates non-threat and social safety. Wolves do it. Dogs do it. Apparently lots of pack predators do variations of it. Katie demonstrated again. It's pre-linguistic. Activates different neural pathways than language processing. Show me your training records, Dr. Vexelen demanded. Katie pulled up her datapad. Showed them videos. The cubs on day 1. Aggressive and terrified. Day 3, beginning to respond to basic commands. Day 5, performing complex behavior chains. Day 7, exhibiting problem-solving abilities that didn't appear in any Carvth developmental literature. This is a 15-step behavior sequence, Dr. Silith said, watching Tiny navigate an obstacle course Katie had built from station furniture. Navigate the barrier, retrieve the object, return through the alternate path, deliver to hand, wait for release command. That requires planning, memory, impulse control, and spatial reasoning. She figured it out in 20 minutes, Katie said. Scraps took an hour. Boss did it in 10, but got bored halfway through and tried to eat the finish marker. Carvth juveniles don't develop that level of executive function until at least 12 cycles, Dr. Vexelen said. He was scrolling through developmental charts. These cubs are 6 cycles at most. Executive function develops through practice and challenge in a safe environment, Katie said. They never had that before, just chaos and fear. Now they have structure, clear expectations, and consistent feedback. Turns out that helps. Ambassador Turketh had been standing in the doorway. I don't know how long he'd been there. My offspring, he said slowly, are demonstrating cognitive abilities beyond their developmental stage because a human trained them like animals. Because I gave them tools to manage their stress and environment. Katie corrected gently. Sir, your children are brilliant. They were just too scared to show it. Boss walked over to the ambassador, sat at his feet without being told, looked up at his father with calm, clear eyes. Turketh stared down at his son. His stripes cycled through at least 20 colors. I want, he said finally, a full report on your methods. Every technique, every principle, everything. Sure, Katie said. Fair warning. Most of it's going to sound really weird when you apply it to sapient species. It already sounds weird, I said. Dr. Vexelen was still staring at his datapad, at decades of research that suddenly had a human-shaped hole in it. I need to make some calls, he said quietly. The council meeting happened on day 12, not just station command, full galactic council representation. 6 species, 8 delegates, enough credentials to fill a cargo bay. They wanted a comprehensive explanation of what they were calling the Carvth development anomaly. Katie called it teaching puppies not to eat the furniture. We were in the main conference chamber. The cubs were with Virgin, who'd spent the last 3 days learning Katie's methods and was now apparently a convert. I'd watched him practice clicker training with the same intensity he usually reserved for weapons certification. Ambassador Turketh presented first, showed before and after behavioral data. 43 aggressive incidents in 6 days versus 0 in the last 4. Property destruction versus environmental enrichment. Stress markers versus content indicators. My offspring were suffering, he said. His translator rendered the growls with unusual clarity. I did not recognize it because I expected their behavior to manifest as sapient distress. Instead, it manifested as instinctive threat response. The humans saw what we could not. Dr. Vexelun went next. He'd spent 4 days reviewing everything. Neural scans, behavioral analyses, developmental comparisons. He looked like he hadn't slept. What we're observing is unprecedented, he said. Cross-species pack bonding at a neurological level. The cubs have integrated human behavioral cues into their threat assessment and social hierarchy frameworks. They've learned to regulate their own stress responses using techniques that shouldn't translate across evolutionary barriers. But they do translate, Dr. Silith added. She'd been running comparison studies with other predator species. We tested similar approaches with Kelvor juveniles, Yith pack members. Preliminary results suggest the underlying neural architecture for this type of conditioning is more universal than previously theorized. One of the council delegates, a Vexithari administrator named Kirnell, raised a manipulator appendage. Are we suggesting that sapient beings can be trained like animals? No, Katie said. Everyone looked at her. She'd been quiet up until now, sitting at the end of the table. We're suggesting that sapient beings still have animal biology. Stress responses are biological. Fear is biological. The need for social structure and safety is biological. Sapience doesn't override that. It exists alongside it. But your methods, Kirnell pressed, they're designed for non-sapient species, dogs, creatures that humans domesticated and controlled. My methods are designed for teaching any creature how to feel safe and make choices, Katie corrected. Dogs learn them easily because we've bred them to work cooperatively with humans. But the principles work because they're based on how brains process reward, consequence, and social information. That's not specific to dogs. That's neurology. You reduced complex sapient beings to simple stimulus-response patterns, another delegate said. Katie pulled up a video on the conference display. Showed Tiny working through a puzzle box Katie had built. Multiple steps, problem-solving required, adaptive thinking demonstrated throughout. Does that look simple to you? Katie asked. She figured out that puzzle in less time than it took me to build it. These cubs aren't reduced. They're thriving. They're showing cognitive abilities ahead of their developmental stage because they're not spending all their energy on fear responses anymore. The human has a point, Turketh said. His stripes were steady amber. My offspring were intelligent before. They simply could not demonstrate it through the chaos of their stress. Now they can. Show us, Kirnell said. Demonstrate these techniques. So we relocated to the recreation hall, brought the whole council. Katie had the cubs brought in. Boss, Tiny, and Scraps entered calmly, saw the crowd of aliens. Stripes shifted to cautious yellow, but no aggression markers. Katie made her breathing sound. All three cubs oriented to her immediately. Stripes shifted to blue-green. Basic foundation, Katie said. She was in full teaching mode now. Everything starts with attention and impulse control. Boss, sit. Boss sat. Wait. Katie placed treats on the floor in front of all three cubs. They stared at the treats. Didn't move. Good wait. Okay. They took the treats. Calm, controlled. Now, environmental challenges. Katie activated 3 cleaning units simultaneously. The cubs tracked them, but showed no aggression. 6 days ago, 1 unit triggered full prey drive response. They've learned to categorize them as non-threatening through gradual exposure and positive association. She threw toys near the units. The cubs retrieved them without incident. Problem solving. Katie pulled out the puzzle boxes. The cubs approached them with clear intent, worked through the mechanisms, retrieved rewards. Social cooperation. Katie made a gesture. The cubs arranged themselves in a triangle formation. She placed a large toy in the center. Made another gesture. All 3 cubs grabbed the toy simultaneously. Moved it together to a designated spot. Sat and waited for release. And most importantly, Katie said, choice and autonomy. She opened the door to the cubs' quarters. They can leave any time. They stay because they choose to. Because this environment makes sense to them now. The council watched in silence. Katie clicked her clicker. The cubs looked at her expectantly. Go see your dad, she said, pointed at Ambassador Turketh. All 3 cubs walked calmly to the ambassador, arranged themselves around him in a protective formation. Scraps rested his head on Turketh's foot. The ambassador's stripes cycled through colors that I was starting to recognize as parental affection. The question, Kiernan said finally, is what do we do with this information? Integrate it, Dr. Vexelen said immediately. Every predator species station assignment should have behavioral enrichment protocols. Every juvenile residential situation needs environmental assessment for stress factors. We've been so focused on treating young sapients like small adults that we ignored their developmental needs. We need specialists, Dr. Silith added. Individuals trained in both sapient psychology and behavioral neurology. People who can bridge the gap. We need Katie to train people, I said. Everyone looked at me. What? She's the only one who's actually done this successfully. She should teach others. Katie looked uncomfortable. I'm not a teacher. I'm a dog trainer who got really lucky with interspecies neurology. You revolutionized our understanding of predator development, Dr. Vexelen said. That's not luck. That's skill applied across unexpected parameters. I just treated scared kids like scared kids, Katie said, regardless of how many legs they have. Ambassador Turketh stood. The cubs adjusted their formation automatically, staying close but not restricting his movement. The human will train my staff, he announced. When we return home, I will not have my offspring's progress lost because we lack understanding of these principles. If other Carvth families face similar challenges, they should have access to these methods. Other species will want the same, Kiernan said. She was already making notes. We'll need to establish protocols, training programs, certification standards. We'll need to call them something other than dog training, another delegate added. Behavioral enrichment specialist, Dr. Silith suggested. Cross-species developmental support, applied neurology for juvenile sapients. Or, Katie said, we could just call it what it is. Teaching people and their kids how to understand each other better, regardless of what species they are. The meeting continued for another 2 hours. Protocols were drafted, programs outlined, funding allocated. The council was already planning implementation across dozens of stations and hundreds of species. Katie spent the time sitting on the floor with the cubs, teaching Scraps a new trick that involved navigating around obstacles without knocking them over. He was terrible at it, kept trying to eat the obstacles instead. She looked happy. 3 weeks later, I found Katie in the Environmental Services Bay. She had the Waste Reclamation System's control panel open and was making adjustments while consulting with one of the maintenance engineers. The cubs said it was growling at them, I said. The cubs were right. Pressure equalization cycle was creating low-frequency vibrations in their audible range. Sounded like territorial challenge vocalizations. Katie twisted something. The system's hum changed pitch. Should be better now. You fixed our waste system because it was scaring the cubs. I mean, it was also operating inefficiently. This is better for everyone. She closed the panel. Virgan wanted to know if similar approaches would work with the Yith juveniles on Deck 7. Apparently they've been having territorial disputes with the cargo loaders. Are you seriously going to train every species' offspring on this station? Only if they need it. She grinned. Besides, I'm teaching your staff the techniques. Eventually, you won't need me at all. The council wants to establish a training academy. Name it after you. Absolutely not. She looked horrified. That's weird. Just call it what it does. The Katie Protocol? I will leave this station right now. I laughed. Couldn't help it. You know the cubs leave with the ambassador in 3 days. I know. We've been doing separation protocol, gradual reduction of contact time, transitional objects, teaching the ambassador's staff all the maintenance behaviors. Katie pulled out her datapad, showed me videos of Carvth adults practicing clicker training. They looked deeply uncomfortable but determined. Boss is ready. Tiny's a little anxious, but she'll adapt. Scraps tried to eat the clicker yesterday, so he's perfectly normal. Are you ready? Katie was quiet for a moment. They don't need me anymore. That was always the goal. Build the skills, transfer the knowledge, step back. They have their family. They understand their environment. They're going to be fine. You're going to miss them. Obviously. They're great kids. She smiled. But there's a Velcor family arriving next week with twins who apparently keep trying to phase through the walls when startled. And Virgan says the Kelvor juveniles have been hoarding food in the ventilation system. So, you know, plenty to do. You're really going to stay? Train people in applied interspecies behavioral neurology? Someone has to. Katie said. She headed for the door. Plus, I heard the station AI has been developing opinions about furniture arrangement. Want to take a look at its learning algorithms? Pretty sure we can apply some basic enrichment principles. You're going to train the station AI. Why not? If it's developing preferences, it's showing early cognitive flexibility. Might as well encourage healthy development patterns. She left. I stood in the Environmental Services Bay, surrounded by humming machinery that was no longer accidentally terrifying predator cubs, and pulled up my reports. Katie had been on station for 3 weeks. In that time, she'd revolutionized our understanding of juvenile development, established entirely new protocols for cross-species behavioral support, and fixed our waste reclamation system. Also, she was probably going to train our AI. I started drafting a requisition for advanced behavioral analysis equipment and a much larger facility budget. This was going to be a very interesting assignment.